Hi, I'm Keith Ferrazzi. I'm here to espouse and advocate for my friend Peter Guber's new book, Tell to Win. The power of story in all of our lives, whether we're salespeople looking to influence, whether we're leaders looking for individuals to follow, it really comes down to our capacity to tell great stories. And as Peter once said to me, Keith, stories are emotional transportation. So this is your opportunity to take people in an emotional place while at the same time leaving your mark and imprint on those individuals. There was a wonderful story from Never Eat Alone that I think really hits home on some of the messages and follows much of Peter's advocacy and some of his methodology that I know will be very powerful for you in your life. I hope you like it. We call it the Big Wheel story.
Let me tell you a story. When I was about 8 years old, my pop had been unemployed. And back in those days, when you were unemployed for 6 months, which this was, even if you got hired back, you were hired back as what they called a new man. He was going to lose all of his pension time. In other words, this was a pretty economically bad time for us. And it was November. Christmas was coming up. And we were driving down a back street to our home. And my dad saw in someone's trash along the side of the road a big wheel. You know, one of those three-wheel plastic things. And in that moment, my father must have been thinking, gosh, do I pull my car off to the side of the road to pick up a piece of trash for my son's Christmas present? Or do I maybe drive home and drop him off and come back and hope that it's still there? No, my dad wasn't have any of that. He knew that this was something that would make his son happy for Christmas, and he was going to go for it right now. So he pulled his car off to the side of the road, and he didn't just grab the big wheel and put it in the car. He grabbed the big wheel and he walked up the sidewalk to knock on the door to ask whether or not the woman would be willing to give him that big wheel for his son's Christmas present. Now, I got to tell you, embarrassingly, I was hiding in the back of the car, afraid one of my snooty friends from school might go by seeing us picking up trash for Christmas. And how do you think my father felt? How do you think my dad felt knowing that his son was embarrassed by the fact that we were picking up trash for Christmas? But it didn't stop him. Remember, my father used to say, don't ever be afraid to ask. The worst anybody could ever say is no. So Dad's walking up the sidewalk, knocks on the door, the woman comes to the door, and the two of them are talking. And I found out later that they were saying, of course you can have the big wheel. You know, my grandkids have subsequently moved away, and we were cleaning up the garage and the basement, but wait, we've got other stuff. And the woman disappeared into the garage, and she came out with this bicycle, and she said, would your son like a bike for Christmas? At this stage, I'm now looking up, peeking out of the car door, and I'm getting up and I'm walking up the sidewalk because I didn't care if anybody saw me. This is a bicycle, for God's sakes. And the woman saw me. She looked at me. And in that moment, she walked into the garage, she pushed up the garage door. She said to my dad and I, would you mind if I gave your son that go-kart for Christmas? I'm like, cha-ching, the best Christmas you could ever possibly imagine. But in that very moment, I realized something. That woman had tears in her eyes. She was so elated to be able to make that family, us, me, so happy at Christmas. To this very day, every time I go home, I always drive by that house just to make sure that I remind myself of that one thing that's so difficult sometimes for me to remember, and that is how that woman must have felt Christmas Eve. And imagine if you were her for a moment. Imagine if you're doing your dishes or something, and here you are thinking Christmas Eve, your grandkids are in bed already because they were home visiting, and you're wrapping some gifts, and you're thinking about that family that you helped at Christmas. And that well-up of emotion and joy that you have as a result of doing that. Who got the real Christmas present that season? She did. Hey, there are people around you every day that would like you to be more successful. People who already love you and care for you, that if you just drop your guards a little bit and let them come in and let them help you, instead of pushing them away and saying, no, I can do all this myself, if you just let your guards down a little bit, your life would be transformed, and so would theirs.